I'm Farah Nabulsi. I'm the writer, director, and one of the producers on the film The Teacher that has had its MENA premiere in the Red Sea Film Festival. And The Teacher is a film, for me, about the love of a parent, about the pursuit of self-absolution, self-forgiveness, and of justice. That's what the film is about.
For the first factor you mentioned, how do you think that love still can exists in such settings? There is war, there is violence, people are dying every day, and yet love is still there. What do you think about this thing?
Love is always there. That has to be. I mean, it is. First of all, it doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that you don't struggle when you're a person living in a place where so much injustice is being inflicted. Of course, that filters into life. Maybe the way you greet your wife or you treat your child, if you've been held up at a checkpoint, if your home has been demolished and now you're trying to figure out just where to get your next meal, as an example. Of course, that puts stress on relationships and so forth. But that doesn't mean that the love disappears. It's just that it becomes harder, or coping with loss. But love is love. Like that's always going to be there, and we are human beings, and we cling to hope as well. And if we don't, then there's nothing. So for Palestinians, in that reality, in that environment, it's not easy, but it's there. There's a lot of love. In fact, in some ways, that's all that's left, if you think about it. When you've had everything taken from you, the one thing in some ways they can't take from you is the love that is in many ways instinctive, but it's tough, of course. It's we've had discussions about this, just to do with the idea of how, would for example, if a parent were abusive to their child after suffering the abuse of a military Israeli soldier, would they bring that into the home? Not because they are a bad person, not because they wish to inflict anything on their child, but maybe sometimes these things might permeate into societies. The idea that pain, if not transcended, is transferred is a big conversation to be had. In fact, in many ways, when you look at what is happening now in Gaza, where the Israeli military and government are pounding a people beyond reason, beyond anything that is defensible, with thousands of children killed, and you wonder, where does that come from? So there is an example of where the Jewish people suffered so much over the centuries and over the decades, and the argument becomes, well, pain or abuse not transcended, not worked through, becomes transferred. And I personally think this is probably a perfect study of that. So, yes, trauma will result in people not necessarily transferring as much love as they should, but very much, though, spending time in Palestine, I've spent enough time with Palestinians, and there is a lot of love. There is a lot of love, but it is hard, of course, in certain ways, in certain scenarios and circumstances. This is a very long answer, sorry.
No problem, but I'm also wondering, do you think that this cycle of violence will ever end? Your movie suggests that it will not, essentially.
Well, it doesn't suggest that it will never end, but it is saying that violence begets violence. So to me, the way you stop the cycle of violence is you stop violence. This is the point. It takes at some point, and I'm sorry to say, but when you have non-equal parties, you have the occupied and the occupier. You have the colonized and the colonizer. You have two different power systems, right? And so when you think about Israel, one of the most powerful militaries in the world, and essentially Palestinians are a civilian population, regardless of their sort of militant arms, then the key is for one of those parties at some point to say, right, stop the violence, let's actually, end this. And if you've got an occupier and a colonizer, well, it's ultimately them who have to say, let's stop the violence, and they're not going to do that alone. So yes, there is a route to an end of this, but it requires international involvement and pressure. So we've gotten into a conversation here that goes beyond the film, but yes, violence begets violence, so we need to find a way out of that violence. And that requires sitting down and with genuine goodwill and intention, of course. Genuine goodwill and intention. If one of the parties, especially the more powerful party, is refusing to do that, then that requires a pressure to bring them to that conversation, to make them sit down and say, hey, let's solve this. So I think it's solvable.
Okay.
But yes, violence does beget violence.
I was also surprised. There are some moments in the film, particularly when with the older brother, that there is a sense of humor, and I'm wondering if Palestinians still retain their sense of humor after all that's happened. I mean,
yes. This goes to the question to do with love, because look, Palestinians really, everything that you or I feel in life, in our good times and in our bad times, it's the same. So, yes, in fact, again, we talk about love is all they have in many ways. Okay, sense of humor is needed, is required. How do you cope otherwise? So it's a natural part of humanity anyway, but at the same time, have you ever been in circumstances where a thing is so shit that you have to find humor, otherwise you would cry, otherwise you would, So, at least that's the whole point, is to have three-dimensional characters in a film, in your story. They have to have all the characteristics that any person would, right? The humor is, they've got one of the best sense of humors, actually,
Okay. To get back a bit more into the film, tell me a bit, how did the casting work? Because you found some wonderful actors to tell the truth.
Yeah. So Saleh Bakri, we'd worked together in my previous short film, The Present. I went to visit him when I just had the idea of the teacher, and I told him the story, and he really liked it. And then I said to him, you're going to be the teacher, and he's like, okay. So that was done. So I cast him, and I started to write further drafts with him in mind. When it came to Imogen Poots, we had just casting Leo Davies and Lissy Home in London, and they kind of came to me with their sort of top names for the role of Lisa. I had my wish list, and Imogen Poots was high up on both our lists, and so that worked out beautifully. She read the screenplay, she really liked it. We had a great 2-hour Zoom call, and that was that. Mahmoud Bakri, who is Yaqub, the older brother in the film, he's actually Saleh Bakri's younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd heard that he was interested in acting. He's a cinematographer. He was studying film at university, and sort of had a chat with him, an audition, and I'm so pleased that I cast him. And as for Mohammed Abdurrahman, who acts Adam, our other male lead, I feel like I've discovered this new raw talent in that sense. He had made a short film when he was about 17 years old, to sort of showcase himself, that he wrote and directed and starred himself in. And it was Adam Bakri, who is Mahmoud and Saleh's other brother, who's also an actor, who's a friend of mine, I'm telling you, who basically, I actually, he's the only person I let read the script that was outside of the development circle. And I said to him, look, are there any young actors that you think could play the role of Adam? And he said, there's a short film that was shared with me. So he shares that film with me, and the minute I saw Mohammed Abdurrahman in the film, I knew that, the talent was there. And he looked strangely like a morph version of two of my boys. And that's who were my muse, of how I imagined Adam looking. So it was strange. So I knew he was the one. So it all came in terms of those, core characters. I knew they were the ones,
Okay. And the last question, since we don't have much time, tell me, how was the experience of shooting there? You shot in Palestine, right? Yeah. So how was it? The logistics?
You know, shooting in Palestine was, I think, probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
Was it dangerous?
I say the word dangerous. I mean, yes, you are shooting a film in militarily occupied, colonized place, you know, and that comes with all the violence that comes with that in that sense. So it's more institutionalized and systematic. So like checkpoints and roadblocks and permit systems and these things. Now, sometimes those, you know, making a film in independent cinema is hard enough anyway. But when you're doing it in an environment where there are all these other dynamics, you have to be smart about where you're choosing to shoot and these things. But it was more the emotional, mental toll that it took on me, to be honest, where actually some things that were being depicted in the film itself, some of the injustices, such as the settler violence and vandalism, were taking place in nearby places in real time while we were shooting. So an example of this is when illegal Israeli settlers started burning trees in the village of Bereen. The village of Bereen is where our protagonist from the film is from.
In real life, you mean?
Yeah. So it's the character Bassem al-Saleh is from the village of Bereen.
Yeah.
We were shooting near the village of Bereen, and while we were shooting, illegal Israeli settlers started burning the olive groves there. That is something that also takes place in our film. So you can imagine
almost a documentary.
It's almost in a very and you know that this is a fiction film, but it's very, very rooted in truth and reality, and it's inspired by true events, and it's, you know, so it just had a very difficult emotional, mental toll where you're trying to shoot something and give it justice. It's not a period drama. This isn't something that took place and I'm making a film about now. No, it's taking place currently, and I'm shooting in that location. Another example is when we finished shooting a scene in the center of Nablus, the city of Nablus, late at night, 1 a.m. At 6 a.m, I received messages that the Israeli military had entered the city of Nablus and blown up a house about 2 kilometers from where we were shooting. So you're trying to stay positive, you're trying to do a film justice, you're trying to finish your film, you want to keep everybody safe and not too nervous. And that's not easy. So it was extremely tough. But there's also the side that when you're shooting there, the topography is amazing, the authenticity, the people, the talent that you could tap into. It was an incredible experience as well. And all my actors that came from abroad said it was a life-changing experience for them. So, you know.
Okay, you made the change. Okay, great. That's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.